In a shooting in Catonsville, officers were called out yesterday. Sarah joins us now from Washington.
So during 16th and 17th century, that's when Europe started to develop paper currency. Basically, goldsmiths, they took in gold and gave back a receipt for a fee to hold on to the client's gold. People eventually started to trade the receipts that they were given by the goldsmith, because they didn't want to go back and get their gold and give the person their gold, and the other person had to carry so much weight because gold wasn't that light. So people eventually started to trade just the receipt, and this is what became known as gold certificates. Goldsmiths realized that no one is actually coming to grab their gold. Goldsmiths, they got together, and one of them says, hey, we don't even need to have the gold. All they want is the receipts, because the gold, no one is picking it up. So we can actually lend out, because there's people who are coming in to they're trying to borrow money, and we're not giving it to them because we don't have enough gold, but nobody's picking it up. So all they want is the receipt. So we're gonna give them the receipt. So it was illegal to borrow it and with interest because of the church. And that's the main reason why the banking industry is hush hush on the down low. They're like, hey, I'll let you borrow some money, but you gotta pay me back with interest. Oh yeah, no problem. So that's how it came to be, and that's why the whole banking industry is all like, oh, on the down low. Don't tell nobody, but just pay me back, with interest. So all they want is the receipts. So the person comes in for some gold and fills out the application, the contract, everything is proper, and the goldsmith has the gold in his hand. He's like, here's the gold. He signed the contract, and he's like, but you can just keep the gold here because all you want is the receipt, right? And he's like, oh yeah, that's right. So he gives him the receipt, let's say 100 coins. So now he has to pay him back 100 coins plus 5% on top of that, without ever lending the client any gold. And that's how money is created out of nothing. And that is the premise of money creation today. That's what we're going to talk about. Inflation as well, but mainly money creation. Because think about it. The goldsmith, did his balance sheet change after the client left the bank? No. And when he came in, he didn't deposit anything. But he's leaving with a piece of paper that says that he has borrowed gold. That's when double entry accounting came into existence, to balance the balance sheet. That's how the banking industry creates money, and that's what we're going to talk about, as well as inflation and why inflation happens. Subscribe and like.
This is the Rules and Cash Show. Bam bam, calling shots like a maestro. This is the Rules and Cash Show, where the wild and the crazy grow. Turn it up, feel the rhythm flow. Hustle rock, bam bam, let's go.
Have you noticed that your paycheck doesn't stretch as far as it used to be? Or wonder who exactly is printing all that money and why prices keep climbing? Inflation, the general rise in prices, is closely tied to how money is created and pumped into the economy. In plain terms, if we add dollars faster than the economy actually grows, each dollar loses value. As the IMF bluntly notes, if the money supply grows too big relative to the size of an economy, its purchasing power falls and prices rise. In other words, flooding the system with money is like diluting its worth. First, let's clear up a misconception, okay? Money is mostly digital nowadays. like thinking that there's a press somewhere out there and it's just chugging out dollars after dollars. It's a wrong way of looking at it. Actually, 97% of our money supply is digital, electronic. And in modern economies, physical cash is just a tiny slice of the total money supply. In the UK, for example, deposits outnumber actual cash by over 30 to 1. However, in the United States, it's about, I believe, 8 to 1. And most money is really just digits in bank accounts or ledgers, not gold or printed bills. Our currencies are fiat, meaning they have no backing. They're not backed by gold anymore. Ever since Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971. As a matter of fact, if we go back all the way to 1791, I believe, and Alexander Hamilton, who was a very big a proponent for the central banking system, was the first one when they created the first central bank. So it stood around for about 20 years, and then Thomas Jefferson really did not like central banks. He thought the power should not be centralized but decentralized, so that each community would have its own bank, which is the right way to go about it. And he demolished the first bank. But then in 1816, a second bank was again made, but this time Andrew Jackson, the president, demolished that bank, which was the second bank, and he called it the Monster Bank. He said that it pocketed the few at the expense of the many, and he called it the Monster Bank. And that got demolished, but then there were way too many banks around that they couldn't do anything about it. The system just grew. And in, I believe, 1856 or so, that's when they adopted gold standard to back up the dollar. So throughout history, when the wars came, they took it off the dollar standard, the gold standard, I mean. The dollar, they took it off the gold standard, and because they had to print that much money and create money to pay for the soldiers, to pay for war, like during the War I, during the World War II, and then after the World War II, it was a Brentwood agreement. Let me look it up. It's called. Let's see. Yeah, so the Bretton Woods Agreement, which was created in 1944 by delegates from 44 nations in a conference in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. This system pegged exchange rates to the US dollar, so which was convertible to gold at the fixed rate. With all other currencies pegged to the dollar, the agreement was also established the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank to promote economic stability and growth, overseeing exchange rates, providing financial assistance, and funding the reconstruction and development. The system's dominance ended in 1971, like I said, due to Nixon coming off the dollar standard. And a lot of nations saw that America, I can't believe that all countries got together and they actually gave their gold to America to hold it. Like they're not gonna actually take the gold and just start printing money. And they're like the French actually, they're like, hey man, we want our gold back because here's the dollars and we really want it back. And they actually came with with naval ships and everything. It's recorded. And they came to the New York harbor to, and came to the actual bank. The Federal Reserve knocked on the door and said, hey man, we want our gold, okay? And they actually got their gold. The French Navy got their gold, and that's when Nixon gave that famous speech about the dollar coming off the gold standard, which is crazy, man. So let me ask you, so who makes all this money? Who is creating all this money, and who is the one that's keeping all those digits digitally? Like, okay, so there's commercial bank lending. When banks issue loans, they don't hand out cash like from a vault. They create new deposits in the borrower's account. They just type in the digits on the computer, and magically the money appears, which is crazy. Because I've always wondered, like, okay, man, I went shopping and I bought the same food, got the apples, my bananas, got the ice cream, whatever I usually get, and it's always costing me about $120. And now I went shopping a few days ago, $320. I'm like, how's that possible? How is that possible? Why are the prices so high? Well, the reason being why the prices are so high is because of money printing. When the money supply goes up, the value, just think about it this way. If there's three ways that banks loan out money. They loan out for asset purchases, for consumer purchases, and small business or business productive transactions, business for business reasons, basically. If you loan money out for asset purchases, such as real estate, for example, what happens? You don't need to be a genius or a rocket scientist to figure this out. If they keep on lending out money, giving money for assets such as real estate, what will happen to the real estate prices? Exactly what we're seeing right now. The prices are just unaffordable and gone through the roof. It's just insane. And same thing with consumers. If they just keep on lending money out for loans for consumers just to spend, what will happen to regular prices like shopping, like I did? The prices went through the roof, like 3 times more expensive. That's just insane. And so Biden, during the Biden administration, because of the stimulus checks and other things, how much did it go? They printed out like $4 trillion or something, and it's just insane. So, talking about the money creation. So, if there is no such thing as federal unbalanced budget or unbalanced federal budget, there is just no such thing. Federal budget is always balanced. So, for example, if the government takes in $5 trillion, $5 trillion, that is just an insane number. $5 trillion, but spends $6 trillion. Where does that $1 trillion comes from? What happens to it? Because they got the 5 from all the taxes, but they spent 6. It's called the silent tax. Milton Friedman really talked about it real well. I'll put a couple of videos in the description below that you can watch to see. He is absolutely correct. About 12 to 18 months after money is pumped into the economy, that's when we see inflation and the prices going off the roof. Just, I want to show you a few charts right now to show you that as soon as money supply is printed, not just in the United States, but all around the world. Some people say, "Oh man, it's due to the unions, or it's due to the some external factors. That's why we're seeing inflation." No, there is only one reason why there is inflation, and that is because the government prints money and pumps more and more money into our economy, especially when they do it for asset and consumer loans, because banks just type in the digits and boom, money is created out of nothing. So there is, like I said, three reasons why how money is created and for what reason. When you go to a bank, you get a loan for consumer and asset. That's not a good way that's not good for economy, because inflation will be there, and you'll have these busts and booms of banks like we saw in 2008, for example, the banking crisis. But if you lend out for business purposes, so that GDP will go up and there will be actually productive sale and services jobs created, that's a different story. Then the economy will go up and there will be no inflation, because there is no money being pumped into the asset and consumer goods and services, because you're not getting loans, but you're actually producing the services and goods. So another thing is that central banks like the Federal Reserve or the European Central Bank can inject vast amounts of new money by buying assets, just like the Fed did to bail out in 2008. To bail out the banks, they bought 25% of those basically bad assets, and that was a lot. For instance, when the Fed buys government bonds, it simply credits the seller's bank account with new reserves. Those extra reserves give banks more fuel to lend, expanding the money supply even further. During the quantitative easing, the Fed bought trillions in securities, pumping massive amounts of money into the financial system. By contrast, as of mid-2020, the Fed's balance sheet ballooned from about 4.3 trillion to over 7 trillion in a few months, showing the sheer scale of money creation in action. There is also government spending and deficits. When a government spends more than it collects in taxes, it has to finance the shortfall. Just like I was saying, where does the government get that $1 trillion? Well, it just creates it out of nothing by printing, by buying the bonds, and just typing the digits in the computer, and boom, there's the money. But that's the tax. That is the silent tax, because when it does that, 12 to 18 months, we pay, as the consumer and the taxpayer, we are going to pay that. All that money that there was no production, no taxes paid upon it, it will reveal itself in the form of, you guessed it, inflation. And When that happens, just like when I went shopping, it's insane. Because they basically, the Fed's balance sheet was $4.3 trillion, and it ballooned to over $7 trillion. So the money that they couldn't collect in taxes, now we're gonna have to pay, and we're paying it in inflation. That's why the prices are just ridiculously high, and it's just unbelievable. Selling bonds to investors just swaps existing money, cash, for an IOU. Like, I owe you, bro. Yeah, I'll pay it back. Don't worry. It doesn't by itself create new money. Only when a central bank buys those bonds, even indirectly on the open market, does it effectively print money for the government. During the 2020-21 pandemic, the US ran roughly 5 trillion in deficits, and the Fed ended up creating about 3 trillion buying treasury debt. In essence, much of that spending was funded by newly created dollars. For perspective, US federal debt jumped from about 79% of GDP to in 2019 to 97% in 2022, with COVID era deficits peaking around 15% of GDP. And also there's the 3% which prints the physical currency. The centralist banks do physically print banknotes and mint coins. However, this is really the tiniest part of the story. Today, digital money dwarfs physical cash. Printing bills is mostly symbolic. The real money creation happens electronically. Each of these channels adds to the money supply, and as monetary theory tells us, pumping too much money into the economy without matching rise in goods and services eventually leads to inflation. Each of these channels adds to the money supply. If we keep turning the money printing crank, prices eventually go up. Like, let's go over inflation real quick. Inflation 101. When more dollars chase the same goods. Inflation is just overall rise in prices. So let's say you had $100 and you could buy a little computer or an old school phone. Well, you went to sleep, you woke up, and now you can't even buy an apple for that $100. There is your inflation. So the way we measure inflation is called CPI. It's the Consumer Price Index, which I'm gonna show you. Like I was saying, different countries that started pumping money into their economy saw inflation right after. I'm gonna show you a few slides and you'll see that what I'm saying is crazy, but it's the truth. So inflation is let's say inflation is 3%. So as we can see here, this is the US broad money supply versus the consumer price index. As you can see here, this is the 5-year broad money per capita growth, and this is the consumer price index growth. So as they're printing out money, here's the money, print out, boom, boom, and the inflation goes down because they're not printing as much money. As soon as they start printing more, there's inflation follows right after. Boom. Then it comes up, comes down. 1970, 1913. Of course, they gotta fund the war. And here, same thing. They start printing out so much money. Boom, inflation right behind them came. Boom. They stop printing as much money. and down, and the inflation just went whoop steep down. Now 1945, that's when the World War II happened. So as soon as they started printing out that money, they went off the gold standard. Boom, inflation followed right behind them. As you can see, it goes down. It's a fact. It's not something that you can debate. We have data, and it shows clearly that monetary supply correlates with inflation like 1-to-1. The more money you print, if you did not collect it as taxes, what's going to happen is inflation. It's a silent tax, and we're going to be paying for it about 12 to 18 months later down the road. That's the reality of it. And let me show you a couple other countries. Here we go. Japan, money supply and inflation. So here comes the money supply. As soon as they started printing out money, boom, inflation followed. Money, printing out, inflation is right behind it. They stop printing out as much money, it goes down. Now, as soon as they start printing out a little bit more money, boom, inflation. Inflation is following the money supply like bee on honey. It just follows it. It goes down, it goes down.
This is the Rosen Cat Show. Bam, bam, calling shots.